All righty. Happy Thursday, y'all. Thanks for joining me today. We're just getting started. It's right at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time for me here in Texas. But we'll wait a few minutes to let some folks roll in, and then we'll get started on the Rstudio Team eval demo. We're going to have a bit of a live code, a little bit of slides, and definitely going to be taking questions as they come up in the chat. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop them into the YouTube chat here on the live stream that you're watching. So thanks for joining me. And again, we'll get started in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and drop a few links into the chat. So if you wanted to follow along or wanted to get more information, you could do so. So give me 1 second. I'll drop those for you. A lot of the examples I'm using, you can find the public source code here on my GitHub. So that's going to have some of the details for the slides, as well as some of the example applications we're showing in R and Python. I also have my colleagues from Rstudio who will be answering some questions. So if you see me talking and you see people answering questions in the chat, I'm lucky enough to have some great team members behind me. We also have Kelly O'Brien, who's the Rstudio Connect product manager. So she might answer some additional questions there in the chat. What we've been doing is kind of for a lot of these is if you'd like to say hello in the chat, feel free to say hi to each other in the chat. Usually it's between 60 and 600 people, somewhere in that range in the group. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves or ask questions as well. And let me go ahead and we're about 2 minutes past. I'm going to go ahead and start screen sharing here in a second. I saw somebody mention that there's some echoing, so I'm just checking on that, but I think we're okay. All right. So let me go ahead and kick this off and we'll get started. So I'm going to share my whole desktop here. So for today, again, like I mentioned, there's going to be a little bit of some slide craft in terms of like we do have some slides we're going to walk through, but the bulk of today is going to be walking through the Rstudio team evaluation. So the team evaluation is all three of our professional products. So Rstudio Workbench, Rstudio Connect, and Rstudio Package Manager. The evaluation means that they're time gated in terms of it's just trying out the products, and we provide the hosted environment for that. If you did want to try it out, you just fill out this form and you can click start on the evaluation. And then I'll walk through what the evaluation actually looks like, how you can use the products. And then really what today is about is understanding how these things fit into your workflow in an enterprise, as well as how do you make some of these arguments for using open source. Even if you're not using our professional products, we'd love for you to use them. But even if you're not going to use them, how do you motivate folks to use R and Python and all the wonderful packages that you use in both languages within your organization? So again, I'll jump back into the slides and we'll talk a little bit about Rstudio Team, and then we'll hop over into the evaluation proper and have quite a bit of live code and kind of walking through the whole process. Again, for Rstudio Team, we think of this as really like a single home for R and Python for all data science teams. So regardless of if you're 90% R, 10% Python, or 100% Python and no R, or some other mix in the middle, we've tried to build these products in a way that they're serving both kind of constituencies, that both people are very happy and able to be productive with these products. If you did want to follow along with the slides, you can do this. So here, I'm going to drop this link in the chat as well. Those are going to be available at colorado.rstudio.com/rc/rstudio-team-pres. So again, we're hosting these on Rstudio Connect. So kind of a good, fun example there. As far as the three products, if you weren't familiar with them and kind of the different people who would be interested, maybe you're a data scientist or a data analyst, maybe you're a decision maker, a business user, or someone else kind of trying to make decisions with data science. Or maybe you're even an R admin or a Python admin or an IT admin that's more concerned about all this open source work that's being done and people are trying to be productive, but you're trying to support them and make things secure and scalable and have proper operations around it. So again, we kind of think of this as these are the three core personas that we're trying to solve problems for. In terms of data scientists really want to use R and Python, they want to develop their applications and share them with the rest of the organization, whether that's for other data scientists or for business users trying to make decisions with the data science work they're doing. And then the IT team, whether you're an R admin, meaning that you're kind of in both worlds, or a Python admin, or a traditional IT admin, you're just trying to support all of this and make things operate smoothly. Again, the three products are RStudio Workbench, RStudio Package Manager, and RStudio Connect. RStudio Workbench is where you would do all of your data analysis and kind of writing your code. So you can write there in R, you can write there in Python. You have the RStudio IDE, as well as VS Code and Jupyter. So a nice mix of different environments you can write code in. RStudio Connect is where you'll publish all of your results. So that could be our Markdown reports or Jupyter notebooks. It could also be, interactive applications like Shiny or Dash or Flask or Streamlit in Python. And then lastly, RStudio Package Manager is supporting all of those open source libraries. You can actually store copies of them on premise or in your cloud, behind your firewall, wherever you need them, as well as your own internally developed packages. And these are going to be sent into Workbench and into Connect in this process. So as far as what we're kind of focusing on here at RStudio, we're focused on open source first, in terms of we're really trying to build an open source model where we give away actually the vast majority of the software we create. So things like Tidy Models, the Tidyverse, our Markdown, those are open source packages that we're giving away, freely available to anyone who wants to use them. The professional products build on top of those to provide some of the things that organizations are more interested in. So security, scalability, access control, as well as logging and authentication and all that. We're also focused on being code first, in terms of we really believe that to do really serious data science and do productive work, that code is going to make you better. And then learning even a little bit of code or learning a lot of code can help you be a more productive data scientist and have more control over what you're building. And lastly, centralized or even cloud-based. So this means that our products run on a server, whether that's on-premise, bare metal, existing servers you have, or in a virtual private cloud like you might find on, say, AWS, the Amazon Marketplace, or Azure, or Google Cloud, or the other providers. Again, we're focused on R and Python as the languages of choice for these. And this will actually have R and Python code throughout the presentation today. And then as far as these, I've already talked about them, but RStudio Workbench, RStudio Connect, and RStudio Package Manager, all three of those products make up RStudio Team, the environment that we're talking about today. So we'll talk about one more slide, then jump into the live coding section. But really the problem here we're trying to solve is that there's this chasm or this gap between what data science teams are doing and trying to doing and actually impacting the business and creating business value or affecting decisions in a positive way. So data science teams create things, but it's stuck on their laptop, or they're trying to share something with their boss or their colleague, and they have to email it to each other, or they have to put it into a shared drive. The person downloads it and moves it over. As far as the other portions, you might actually have automated decisions. So you're trying to actually put your models into, say, production, where they're interacting with your website or working with the other software that you want to embed in the process. So how do we cross this chasm and get the data science work that you're doing into the hands of either live decision makers or into the automated decisions that people are doing inside the software? So obviously, as a data scientist, you're either creating insights or trying to share insights or creating models that are going to be used downstream. And that's what you're doing today, but you're still trying to get them closer to either decision makers for automated decisions or actual human interaction. So in our world, you'll be creating these insights or writing code in R and Python in a data science workbench that supports both languages. So log in one time, you have your full environment for R, you have your full environment for Python. So with R and Python, you can build amazing things. You can build applications, reports, APIs. You can send programmatic emails as opposed to manual emails. There's a lot of power here in terms of the things you can build. Once these things are finished, you can now get them onto a deployment server, basically a centralized location where if people want to access the things you're creating, they know to go here. They go to this location, they log in, it's access controlled, it automatically scales up to meet the user needs, all of the things you want there. And this will deliver the actual applications as well as scheduling emails and other assets or automations that go to live decision makers, or hosting things like APIs, so Plumber in R or Flask or Fast API in Python, which integrate into other software, whether it's Java or JavaScript or your website, any other type of things there. And then lastly, to make sure all these things work together, the package manager will actually ease some of this maintenance and reproducibility of these environments to manage your packages for both the Workbench in terms of where you're writing code and you're developing assets, and your deployment server where the kind of production assets live. So in terms of what this looks like, again, this is Rstudio Workbench where you're analyzing your data, Rstudio Package Manager, which is applying the packages to Workbench, as well as Rstudio Connect. And then all the amazing open source libraries that you know and want to use are the things you're actually creating. So all of that work you've already done to learn things like Jupyter or Streamlit or Shiny or Markdown or Pins, all of these things can be published to Connect, and you can work on them inside Rstudio Workbench. All right, so let's hop over into the evaluation. Again, if you did want to do this in the future immediately after this, you can always go to rstudio.com/products/team/evaluation, or just search for Rstudio Team Evaluation, and you'll be able to access this. Just give us a little bit of information, and we'll send you the link to open up your own evaluation environment. So once you actually get an evaluation environment, this is a hosted environment, meaning that there is nothing for you to install for the evaluation. You just go to the URL and you get access to the entire suite of our products for this temporary environment. So you have access to Rstudio Workbench, access to Rstudio Connect, and Rstudio Package Manager, which make up Rstudio Team. It's got some additional links in terms of if you need some help, or if you want to learn a bit more about Team, or you have some questions, as well as access to a built-in mail server, so you can send emails kind of from Connect or through some of the automations there and see how those work. So really part of the power here is that if you wanted to evaluate how can I advocate for using these open source tools in my organization, rather than having to download the software, install it, and go through kind of this IT process, you could actually evaluate it here in your browser, show some of the work you're doing to your colleagues or to your decision makers or to your stakeholders who own the budget, or your IT colleagues, and actually say, here's the things I could be doing. Can we move forward and try and make this a reality? Something else to note in terms of once you've gotten to this page, you're going to be logging into everything with the default password and username. I've changed the username for this environment because I don't want anyone to accidentally log into my environment with this information. So I have changed this for mine. But for you, if you were to open up this environment, you could go to, say, Rstudio Workbench, and it's going to have the default username and password as Rstudio and Rstudio. So easy to remember and log in, and you can use the same credentials inside Rstudio Connect. As far as the next question will probably be like, okay, cool, like I actually want to see this in action. So let's open up Rstudio Workbench. I'll accept this. And you'll note that it automatically logs me in because I've already logged in here. If I wanted to, it will come with some basic examples of code, but I could always upload or write my own code here. It's a full RStudio environment. So let's go ahead and open an RStudio session. I'm inside Rstudio Team now, so it might look a little bit different than your traditional RStudio environment. But the core idea is I can open up a new RStudio session by clicking New Session. We'll say my first session. I want to use Rstudio, and I'll start that up. And it'll set me over into the happy environment that I know and love, Rstudio, the IDE. At this point, maybe I have a script I want to use. I could always bring it in from version control. So if I wanted to clone something from, say, like a GitHub repository, I could do that. Or you can actually upload files from your desktop. So I'll go to my downloads, and I have nothing in here because I cleared it out, but I've actually uploaded a few different things for these examples. So there's some things about pins and some things about our Markdown and Python and Shiny, all sorts of different assets here that can look at. So if you had code you wanted to upload, again, please note that this is not a production environment in terms of you shouldn't try and use this evaluation as the environment where you're going to do all of your data science work today, but this is an evaluation of how you could do some of that work. So you can try it out here and see if you wanted to move forward with evaluating it, say on premise, or actually moving forward with professional products. Part of the back out here in terms of, obviously we've seen RStudio. I'll go into a little bit more in terms of what you can do there, but it's more than just RStudio in terms of I can open up a new session and I can actually change the editor. So if I were a Python user, I might be more comfortable in, say, Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, where I could use the notebook environment to write Python code and publish those notebooks to Connect. If I were writing, say, applications like Streamlit, Dash, or Flask, I might be more comfortable in VS Code, which is a great editor for Python, as well as things like JavaScript and some other languages. So those are also available to be opened up through RStudio. There was a question in the chat in terms of using additional clusters. So this environment is run in, this hosted evaluation is run in AWS in a single environment. So it only has access to that local cluster. If you did have something like an Elastic cluster externally to that, something like Kubernetes or Slurm, you could also launch sessions that are running in that Elastic environment. So that is an option if you were running it on premise or in your own private cloud. For the hosted evaluation, you are limited to this local environment or local cluster. So let's start up the Jupyter Notebook, and that hops us right into Jupyter Notebook. There's a welcome to Jupyter that we can go into that has some a little IPython notebook that we can open up. And now we're directly into a Jupyter Notebook, and it's pre-filled with some codes. You can play around here. You can run the different lines and create some plots and things, but just showing you that all the different plots and assets that you're working with work inside RStudio. So we've shown RStudio, we've shown Jupyter Notebooks, and let's just for fun, we'll show a VS Code session as well, because I know a lot of folks that I worked with previously that were using Python really liked VS Code. So here, hopping in directly into VS Code, again, it's kind of just VS Code as it is. You can install some of the extensions that you want or customize it to how you see fit. And we include a little environment. So let's go to, we'll open up a file here. Open, we'll back out. So it's mounting my home directory. So if I go to RStudio, I can move to this files over here, and you can see the welcome to VS Code here on the left is where you would actually log in to click, and then you could actually access some of the example code that's included in the hosted evaluation. All right. So we've shown RStudio, we've shown Jupyter, we've shown kind of a lot of different things going on. So let's go back to the home page. You can see I still have all these different sessions open. And that's part of the power in terms of like I've logged in one time, my one environment that I have to log into, I've been authenticated, and now I have access to all these different coding environments where I can do Python natively, I can do Python natively in Jupyter or VS Code, and I can do all my R work inside RStudio, the IDE. So let's hop into the IDE and we'll go into a few of the different projects. So we can start off with, say, an R Markdown. That's one of my favorite packages in R, and it's very powerful. You can see I've uploaded a file here that actually hasn't been expanded. So let's go ahead and untar this bundle. So I open up this bundle file, and that will actually open up these different portions. So now I have our Markdown as well as a manifest file, some data, and the R project I'm working with. I'm gonna look over at the chat real quick. I see a couple things coming in. disable certain types of environments where, say, Jupyter notebooks are already available via other systems. Yeah, so there's a good question about, are all these mandatory? You know, if you just wanted to use Rstudio Workbench for RStudio, that's more than fine. You know, say you have a Jupyter Hub instance or something else, and that's where you're using Jupyter, that's great. Part of what we were trying to solve here is having kind of an entire workbench, and that's why it was rebranded from RStudio Server Pro to RStudio Workbench, is because we're trying to serve different personas here. So not only R, but R and Python together. For a lot of the IT teams, they wanted to manage one environment as opposed to managing 3 or 4 different custom environments. Now, from an IT perspective, this is lower amount of work for them because they're managing just RStudio Workbench that has all the different environments in one place. So as far as these files, so I've opened up in R Markdown files, what I'm doing here. So let's go ahead and open up the R Markdown. It's a pretty traditional one, and it says I've got some packages I need to install, and that's more than fine. You can install the packages you'd like to see in here. So let's say I wanted to install Flex Dashboard. I can install the Flex Dashboard package, and even though I'm in this hosted evaluation, I can still install packages as I see fit. So let's look at other ones that are available. We have Blastula, Deployer. We can install all these packages if we wanted to. So let's go ahead and do some of that, because part of the benefit of working with Package Manager inside here is we get really fast package installations. So let's install just 3 packages that are kind of already available. We can install them. If you've only been working on your desktop, you might be used to really, really fast package installs because CRAN provides binary packages which install very quickly. So for this, for a Linux environment like I'm running here in RStudio Workbench, packages have to be built ahead of time in terms of that's what Package Manager is providing the Linux binary so they install very quickly. So I was able to install those packages while I'm talking and kind of faster than I'm talking, because I'm using the binaries from RStudio Package Manager. So I've written this R Markdown document. It's got a lot of Python, or sorry, a lot of dplyr code. It's got some parameters and different settings I can do. And say I want to share this with a colleague. Sure, I could take the R Markdown document and I could email it, or I could put it in a shared drive or something else, and they could render it or open up the HTML. But for a business user, they may not want to receive it that way. Like they're like, I don't know what R is. I just want to see the final report. And that's what Connect is providing. So once you've finalized your report, you can actually take this document, and with the blue publish button up here, you can take all the documents in this directory. So there's the R Markdown report, an email, and these returns, and we can create a new asset on RStudio Connect. So I'll click publish, and this will actually take that document, all the dependencies, build everything, and install it on Connect for me. So it's basically taken a snapshot of all the different packages in the environment I'm working in, and it's recreating that environment for me on RStudio Connect. So now, again, in the time that it took me to tell you about it, I now have a URL that I can share with my colleagues, and I can limit access or grant access based on how secure I want it to be. For today's example, let's say that I want to show this to y'all. So I can actually copy this link that I just created. And we can paste it here, and you could actually go to this asset that I just created. Now I open up the sharing settings. So it opens it up inside Connect. And this is our first kind of foray into Connect. We've published something, so it pulls it up here and we can look at it. And it defaults to making it where only I or the specific user who published it can see it. As the publisher, I have the ability to change these sharing settings. So maybe I want to make it available to anyone within my organization. As long as they can log in, they can see this asset. Or what I just did is actually make it public. So anyone with this URL can open it. That's not typical in terms of most of the time you don't want to make things fully available to the entire world, but maybe there's some cases where you might want to do that. If I were to limit it to specific users or groups, this is pulling in from my authentication. So I don't have to go around creating groups in one thing and creating groups in another thing. Whatever your IT team is using for authentication can most likely integrate with RStudio Connect. And then you can use that existing authentication to bring in the users or groups from there. The other component is this is a parameterized R Markdown. So while it's showing one example for this code, and it's got a nice interactive graphic and some interactive graphics down here, it also Connect can handle those parameters inside it natively. So for your business users, they can come in here and change parameters and rerun the report. So they don't have to go ask you, hey, I saw you generate this report. Can you generate a new version for me? And then they wait, and then you send them a new one, and you have this back and forth. They can actually answer some of their own questions and generate a new report or new asset very quickly here. So they can actually rerun and kind of create the new parameters as they see fit. They can either save that or just view it and look at it or email it to themselves if they wanted to. So I could send a copy of this to myself or to collaborators after I've changed some of these parameters. So let's save this as more aggressive. And again, I have the ability to make this available for me or for anyone who accesses this document. Let's just say I want to keep it for me, and now I have two different versions of the same report, and I can flip between the default or this one I've saved as the more aggressive version of this portfolio. Something else that's really exciting in terms of what this can provide is I can schedule this document. Because I've published it with the source code, and because Connect is a data science platform, it can actually re-execute R and Python code. So this R Markdown, maybe I want to run this every day. So again, rather than me having to manually generate a report, manually send an email, manually change parameters, I can just have this report update in place every day at a specific time. So 10:26 a.m., let's not do that. I want it to run really early because my boss comes in at 6:30, and I want to make sure that it's available for her so she can see it whenever she comes in first thing in the morning. And I want it to send an email every time it sends so that she gets the kind of quick notes in her email and then can come to Connect to see the details as well. So now I've saved it as a schedule in terms of this will now be executed every single day at 5 a.m. and will execute all these different things and regenerate this in place for me. So very, very powerful. I'm going to pause again and see. It looked like some good discussion happening in the chat. And Kelly, it looked like there was maybe a question that you're pointing towards me. Do you mind sending that over? So one I see is that for RStudio Workbench, kind of going back, leaving Connect, going back to RStudio Workbench real quick, there's a question about using multiple versions of R. Yes. One of the benefits of using RStudio Workbench is using multiple versions of R in the same environment. So while this is using RStudio 4.1, which is kind of one of the latest versions of RStudio, maybe I have a project from 6 months ago or a year ago that was actually using like R 3.5. And I want to make sure that I can actually, go back to that environment and work with it. I still have, project specific libraries in terms of because I've moved from R 4.1 to R 3.5, these packages need to be installed, but I can do that very quickly because again, I'm using Package Manager to supply the packages to this environment. So I can install these dependencies. RStudio Workbench tells me, hey, these are missing. So let's install them really quickly. Looking at some of the chat questions while this installs. So it's installing 55 packages, and it's going to do that by the time I'm able to read some of the chat messages. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah, so another good question was about, maybe I want to generate something that's, outside of Connect. Like it's great to have, HTML content, but my boss or my colleague wants to see something in PowerPoint or see something in Word. So yeah, absolutely. So we can actually open up, let's go back and do a new session while that's loading because I have my server, I can open up a new session. So let's go to, I believe the report, open up that one. And while my other session is executing, like it's doing all this package installation, it's about halfway done. I'm now in a new environment where I can, do other things while that's occurring. So as a data scientist, I can be more productive because I have multiple sessions running on a bigger server and there's more compute available, there's more RAM, there's more CPU, as opposed to my desktop, which is limited to whatever is there. So the question was about maybe using PowerPoint. So yes, you can generate PowerPoint documents with our Markdown. This one actually can create one based off of a template, and I can publish that to Rstudio Connect. So let's publish it really quickly. So I'm going to publish that document to Connect so that people can go to Connect from their laptop and they can go look at it. And they can access the beautiful HTML content that I've created or the R Markdown report I've created. But it can also generate and attach a PowerPoint as an email. So this is almost done. Again, very quick to install things, move it across. So now I have a PDF report that's hosted on Rstudio Connect. It's got some static graphics and other things. And if I email a copy of it, so let's just email this version to myself, it will not only attach the PDF, but it will also attach a PowerPoint file. So if we go back to the hosted evaluation, I'm in the home environment here. I can scroll down to webmail and open up that link. And now I'm in my inbox here. And you can see I've got a couple different emails, but this is the one that was just sent over. And again, this is similar information. So not only is it able to embed a ggplot directly in the graphics inside the body of my email, but if you look at the attachments, it's also got a CSV file. So in terms of what was the output from my script, it's got that PDF report, and then it's generated this PowerPoint file. I can download that and I can open it natively in PowerPoint because it's a PowerPoint file. And now I have this kind of branded specific PowerPoint file that I've generated automatically with ggplot, with tables, with text that I'm able to generate quickly into PowerPoint. So if I did need to meet someone in the spot where they want to be, where that's Microsoft Office, or if they're comfortable receiving HTML as an R Markdown document, you can do it multiple different ways. Looks like some other questions about Bioconductor. So we do support Bioconductor packages in Rstudio Workbench and in Rstudio Package Manager. So you could actually host those in Rstudio Package Manager and install them inside Workbench. The managing of conflicts would be the same whether you're using R, Rstudio, or Rstudio Workbench. That's kind of something native to R, not something specific to Workbench specifically. As far as using specific package versions, so let's say that we're inside Rstudio. If I install .packages and I do dplyr, it's going to install whatever is the latest available on CRAN or on Package Manager. So we're at dplyr 1.0.7. If I wanted to have a very specific package version, then I could use something like the renv package, that's renv, and that actually allows me to set very specific environments that are recreatable. You don't have to use this. This is something that's optional, but this can allow you to not only install very specific packages, but capture all of those packages at a specific version if, say, you were collaborating on a more complex document. So we've shown kind of this workflow of writing our Markdown inside Rstudio, publishing it to Rstudio Connect, and then viewing them on Rstudio Connect, as well as scheduling them and sending emails. That's a lot of power right there. And that's honestly a bulk of what I do and a lot I get value out of is just automating some of these R Markdown tasks with Rstudio Connect. So take this document that's doing this complex script, rerun it every day or every week, and generate an output. Whether that output is, like we showed here, a PowerPoint file, or it could be a CSV file, or even fitting a long-running model and saving it out to like a database or to a model collection. It can do even more complex things than that, though. Like, we're not just limited to our Markdown documents. So let's actually flip over to, say, tidy models real quick. Another benefit of the Workbench environment is that not only do I have like all these different sessions I can open, but they are larger than my desktop in terms of my laptop may have like 8 GB of RAM and 2 cores. My server could have 256 gigabytes of RAM and 60 cores. It can go as big as your budget is in terms of you can make a server much larger. Per that example, let's say I have a background tuning script that I'm running. So this is some tidy models code. It's doing an SVM model, and it's doing grid search. So it's going across a bunch of resamples, going across a bunch of different parameters, and doing this grid tuning. So of course I could just run this, and it'll take a few minutes to execute. Or within Rstudio, I can actually source this as a local job or as a launcher job. A local job will execute in the same server environment that my session is running, but as a background. A launcher job would launch in a remote session if you had that attached. So say like a Kubernetes environment where it'll scale up to meet that need and scale back down. Let's start it as a local job first. So when I start this up, it's going to do this background tuning, and it's going to spit out some information as it goes along. Importantly, this is happening in the background. So I can still, interact with my console. It's not locked up, but it's just telling me, hey, this background tuning, this long running script I'm running interactively is happening in the background. And I can actually interact with it and say, okay, it's on Bootstrap 5 of 10, and it's going through all the different models. And it's telling me that this has been executing for 30 seconds. So if there is something shorter running that you just want to run in the background, you don't have to publish it to Connect. You can run that through Rstudio Workbench and just run it as a background job. As far as while this is running, there were some good questions about databases and database connections. So if I go to databases.rstudio, one of the benefits of using Rstudio Workbench and Rstudio Connect is that you get access to all of our professional drivers. So what this means is that not only can you use all these different databases like Hive, Impala, Mongo, MySQL, Snowflake, all these great databases in Workbench, but also when you publish content to Rstudio Connect, they can then also use those database drivers. So you can use them in both places and match your dev environment to your production environment. So yes, you can use database drivers or connections absolutely in Workbench as well as in Connect. And you can do authentication as well if you have like data level access for certain databases there as well. So a couple of things going on. Let's go ahead and close email. This background job is still running, but let's close down a few of these things that we don't need anymore. Close this one. And that should be finishing up in maybe 20 more seconds. So we'll let that run for a little bit. Again, I'll check the chat. Yeah, so I think that was the last one. So the job is finished now. So if I were to go here, it'll say succeeded at 10:37 a.m. That's my local time. And you'll notice that there's nothing in my environment. What I did was actually have it save the output out as a file. So when it was done, I don't have it, cluttering up my environment. I actually have it saved completely in the background, as well as a graphic. Ooh, that's a big graphic. So let's zoom out a little bit. As well as a graphic looking at the different parameters and how they all fit. So just to show you that not only can you run it as a background job, but your side effects can be saved. So you can save the model out. You can save graphics. You can even, have an R Markdown document in the background. So some of the other folks might be interested in say, okay, well, you've shown a lot of publishing like R Markdown. Like, what about something else? So again, let's go to Jupyter real quick. I am far from an expert Python developer, but I do dabble in Python every now and then. Just as you would expect, if I have a Jupyter notebook and I want to get it onto Connect and I want to execute it on Connect, I have the same blue publish button. So I can publish this to Rstudio Connect. It gives me a similar thing saying, do you want to publish with source code so you can schedule it or rebuild it, or you just want to publish the HTML content from the notebook itself. I already have a requirements text file, so I can publish it, and it's already connected to the Rstudio Connect server on the evaluation. So I can go ahead and publish this. I've already published it, so there's this existing one, but let's go ahead and publish it to a new location, just so we can show the full process. So when I click publish, It's going to give me quite a bit of information here as it goes through and does a similar process. It's installing very specific versions of the Python libraries, as well as using a virtual environment and a specific version of Python. So it's basically rebuilding the entire environment for me on RStudio Connect. Even though it's Python, it's able to do that as well. So let's go to content. Here's the document I just published, which again is just a fairly basic Python notebook, IPython notebook with matplotlib, some pandas graphics, and then a nice seaborn swirl here. And just like I did with our markdown, I could schedule this to execute on a schedule. So again, for both R and Python, I can execute things as needed and evaluate them whenever I want them to be evaluated, whether that's daily, down to the minute, or even as infrequently as a year. So all of that's able to be customized with the scheduling. So we've shown a little bit about Jupyter. Go ahead and close those ones down. For VS Code, again, some people are like, oh yeah, I really love VS Code. I want to learn more about it. Other people may not have used it before. It's a general purpose development environment. So not necessarily specific to data science, but can do things like JavaScript or Java or general web development, as well as using something like Python inside of it. So if I want to, I can open up a blank Jupyter notebook in terms of there are IPython notebook extensions for VS Code. And I can run Python code in here if I wanted to import pandas as PD. It's going to run a Python kernel and start the Jupyter notebook. So we'll go ahead and use Python 3.9. I can evaluate this chunk. We'll run that. And then I could do PD ahead on a document or something. I'm actually interacting with a live Python kernel now. So I can do like 1 + 1. Or whatever, and it gives me 2. So I'm getting actual output out very quickly by moving into here. Now, more traditionally, within a VS Code environment, I could actually go into and edit, say, like a Dash application or a Streamlit application. So let's open up one of those. And here, again, as opposed to a Jupyter notebook where you're doing very specific cells and text and cells and text to go through things, this is a more traditional .py file, which is often more preferred if you're writing like an application like Dash or Streamlit, which are similar to Shiny applications, but in Python. So this is just kind of a bare bones example taken from the Streamlit server or from their examples. Let's go ahead and create a new terminal. And I'll also open up the README real quick. So the README has some information about the getting started, as well as some information about how I could publish this application. So number one, you do have to form a connection with the server. So you'll have to generate an API key on Connect, and you'll have to connect to that server. Publishing Streamlit applications is done through the rsconnect Python package. So if I were to do like rsconnect help, that will tell me a little bit about the rsconnect package and the different things it can do. And if I wanted to deploy this application, I can quickly copy this over, and I can say I want to publish this Streamlit application to Connect. Again, it's going to be very quick, so it kind of goes very quickly because it's using specific packages. And I can open up that application that I just published on RStudio Connect, and we'll let that load for a second. But this is a Streamlit application that we went from VS Code to Connect very, very quickly. And again, we can interact with it and get the graphic to change. Maybe I want to add Canada to here or something. And now I have Canada added to my graphic. So again, the ability to do things in R and in Python. There's a question in the chat about the video. These videos will remain on YouTube forever. So if you do want to view this later or share with a colleague, feel free to do that. In terms of like cron-like scheduling for schedule control, right now it would be done either through the RStudio Connect API or via the interactive portion here. So let's go back to content for the Jupyter notebook here. We approach it as this way where you have the ability to do it interactively, and you're just setting the time as well as more detail here. That's a good call in terms of like cron-like scheduling. Maybe that's something for Kelly to look at in the future, but right now we have this ability of doing it via the scheduler portion. The other component in terms of like, we've shown publishing a few different assets, both in R and Python. As an admin or as an IT person, maybe you want to learn about like how the server is working. So you can see I've used up, about half of my RAM now. We run a pretty lightweight environment because it's, again, just used for some of these evaluations. But it tells me a little bit about, how much of the computation is being used, both the CPU and the RAM, as well as the number of users, connections, and other different information about the server. In terms of viewing the scheduled content, you could imagine that as you create new assets, it's going to tell you what different things are scheduled. So I have a pen example, this portfolio that we scheduled together on this video call, and then the PowerPoint example that we also published that's going to be executed every few hours or every day. So you can kind of look at what's coming up and what things are scheduled and make sure that they are doing what you expect in terms of when they're occurring, what's the frequency, and you can interact with them very well. As far as storing keys and secure things, that's a great call. So if I go to a different asset I've created, so a pin. So this is an R Markdown document that has a very specific beneficial side effect. So within Connect, I have this thing that's being executed, and I want to pin the code or pin the data to a file here in Rstudio Connect. So within the VARs pane, you see I have a secret called Rstudio Connect key, which is essentially the API key that allows me to interact with Rstudio Connect programmatically. This could be something else. This could be database credentials. This could be a username, password, whatever you want it to be. You could think of it as very similar to like the R environment that you use interactively inside Rstudio Workbench. So if I were to, edit R-envi, if I already like use this, edit R-environ, that's kind of similar to what you would think of it as. Like, you can put things in here in your R environment, and then you can propagate those into Rstudio Connect and create this key value pair. For the Rstudio Connect key, I'm using that so I can publish pins. So this document that I have scheduled generates a nice table, which is great. It looks at some NFL data and creates a beautiful table. That's great. But the more interesting thing that it's doing is taking that data and then saving it out as a pin to Rstudio Connect. A pin is just any file or data set that you want to store on Rstudio Connect. So again, rather than emailing back and forth CSVs or putting them into a shared drive or something like that, you can use the pins package, and that will actually allow you to pull in data sets and share them amongst files or amongst colleagues. So I can take a pin, in this case, a small data frame of this NFL data, and my RStudio, my R Markdown document that's scheduled will scrape some data and then publish it to this file. And so this file I can then access, and I can read it into R by using pin read on this specific name. So even though this data set gets updated very frequently, I can read in the file from the same place each time. If you wanted to do something else, you can also pin files like trained models. So let's say that long model training script that we ran with tidy models, I could actually save that as an RDS file, upload it as a pin onto Rstudio Connect, and then it can be used downstream in other applications. Now, the last part that I haven't really talked about that much was Package Manager. We've been, alluding to it a little bit throughout. But what Package Manager is doing is, again, supplying R packages and Python packages to your environment in terms of the R packages themselves. Like, let's say dplyr, you can install it directly from CRAN, sure, but Package Manager is serving a R package binary in terms of it's pre-compiled and ready to go. So I can install it from Package Manager. It's going to be much faster, and I don't have to build it from source, which can lead to avoiding errors or anything else. Package Manager also allows me to use specific versions. So I can install not only the latest from 1.0.6, but I can also install an older version from, say, 2015. So if I had a legacy project I was working on and there was some breaking change I wanted to avoid, I can install this old package. Another one, so let's say I have one with a system dependency. Let's see about ggplot2, I think. System dependencies, no. Kelly, if you can think of one with a system dependency, let's think about that. So curated color space. What I'm trying to show here is that it also shows you system dependencies in terms of for your admins, your IT admin, they're like, I don't know what R is, but what do I have to install to make it work? So for specific packages, they might have system prerequisites that have to be installed in the environment. And you can install those in Connect and in Workbench so that all the packages work as intended. So let's say SF. Let's do the SF package. So Simple Features is a package for creating maps and geospatial analysis in R. And it has some, it's amazingly powerful, but it's kind of attaches to a few different other system dependencies. So you can see that this one, when I go down to the install system prerequisites, it actually provides a few things that your admin needs to install. But rather than you having to find all these from scratch and be like, oh, I think you need to install GDAL and some other stuff, your admin can just go in, copy this, and then install those globally for everyone on RStudio Connect or globally on RStudio Workbench. So that would be a good example of like having one with system dependencies that you can work with there. So we've kind of gone full circle in terms of talk about RStudio Workbench, all the things you can do there in R and Python, RStudio Connect, and all the things you can do there in R and Python, scheduling, hosting Shiny applications, authentication, connecting to databases, the VARs pane and showing some of the authentication and credentialing you can do there, as well as Package Manager for hosting your environments. I'm going to hop real quickly back into here in terms of talking a bit about some of the arguments that people have to make internally when you're working with IT. And then I'll stay around for a bit and answer again any more questions as they come in chat. So, you've gone into RStudio team evaluation, you've created something amazing, you have these analyses or tools that you want to use, and you've gotten things off your laptop. Like that's the huge win there, is like getting things into a production environment, sharing it across the organization, or embedding it in your other tools. The other hurdle that we didn't really mention, but because we're solving at the same time, is satisfying IT or your security team and their requirements. So IT and security, they want to have very specific things. They're like, I don't know maybe as much about open source. They don't know about R or Python. Maybe they're Linux admins and that's all they know, and that's fine. They just want to know, can it integrate with my authentication? And the answer is yes. RStudio Workbench, RStudio Connect can integrate with single sign-on, so things like Okta, as well as things like PAM or LDAP or more traditional authentication mechanisms. They want to know that your asset that you've created scales automatically. They don't want to have to go around, creating environments for you and spinning things up and spinning things down. Connect actually handles spinning up new sessions to meet user demand as they visit the server. So it's handling some of the scaling for you. They also want to know, like, okay, well, we're working with sensitive data, so I want to be able to audit all the things that occur. RStudio Workbench and Connect have auditoring and monitoring of the server resources, metrics, as well as user activity, so that part can be mentioned as well. And then a few different people asked about connections to databases in terms of, I wanted to actually see things from like Postgres or Snowflake. Yes, you can connect to those and have them work on Workbench as well as in RStudio Connect. So that is what RStudio team is providing, the ability to get things off your laptop into production while maintaining security, scalability, best practices. With the open source software you already know and already are using in R and Python, and in a single platform that can be run on-premise, on bare metal servers, or in your virtual private cloud of choice, so like AWS, GCP, Azure, etc. A very good question came in terms of version control, and that's a best practice. So I'm actually going to hop back out of here. We're going to go back into Workbench, or actually, let's go into RStudio Connect, and I'm going to show you one more thing. So someone was saying, well, I have something on version control, and I don't want to use push button deployment, or I don't want to use terminal deployment. Yes, I can import directly from Git. So I can use an example for today from GitHub because that's where I have a lot of my code. So let's hop over to Rstudio or GitHub, and we're going to go full route here. So let's just go to my GitHub. We'll grab one of the repositories, the Rstudio Team demo. And if I were to grab the URL for this, I've got a few different assets in here. I can paste this into Rstudio Connect and say which branch I want to use. Let's use the dev branch because I haven't pushed it to production yet. And then it says, okay, this is the asset that you can publish directly from Git. So I'll title that Git portfolio dashboard. And now I deploy this. It's going through the same process of rebuilding the environment, but I did all of it through version control in terms of it actually pulled it in directly. And this is the asset I just created in like 15 seconds directly from version control. And part of the beauty here is that because this was published from version control, Connect can actually say, I'm going to watch that repository and I'll check for updates periodically. So this is kind of a lightweight version of not quite continuous integration, but semi-continuous integration, if I'll use that term that way, and Kelly doesn't get mad at me. But the idea that Connect is now looking for that Git repository and saying, hey, let me pull in this Git repository. I will build it if I see changes, or I can force it to be built when I click Update Now. So I have the ability to publish with the push button deployment from Rstudio or Jupyter. I can also publish from the R console or the terminal. And I can also publish from version control or bring in something like continuous integration or continuous deployment if I wanted to go that route as well. I realize that, I'm trying to answer a lot of questions as they come in, but maybe you're like, hey, this was not exactly what I wanted, the exact answers I got. Maybe you had very, very specific questions. Someone mentioned in the chat that you can actually book direct calls, or if you just want to talk to someone one-on-one. We've got lots of different team members with similar knowledge to myself who can answer more direct questions by email or with another call if you want to dive in a bit deeper on any topic. So hopping back into here, again, using best practices, things like version control, as well as all the things your IT and security team wants, you can build out these very complex or very simple assets. So this one, where you can find at solutions.rstudio.com, has examples of pulling in code within our markdown, creating these data sets as pins that serve a published API in Plumber, and then pulled into a Shiny application, all being served by Package Manager. Or doing something similar in Python, but now using a Jupyter notebook and Flask to create your API instead of Plumber. And they're being consumed by, say, an API consumer or by a Plotly dashboard. So again, kind of full comparison here between R and Python. We've got lots of great reviews in terms of maybe you want to go read about what other people think about it. You can go to trustradius.com and read all these different reviews from existing customers and the things they like to do. In terms of maybe they're doing a lot of Python dev, or maybe they're core Rstudio users, or they use Rstudio Connect as their professional publishing platform for all their assets. You can read through the real thoughts of these people who are actually using the product. And then in terms of the complexity that can be built in here, again, maybe you have other things that I didn't show today, like you want to use a Kubernetes cluster. Yes, you can use that with Rstudio Workbench and scale up jobs and then crush them back down when they're not needed. Or you can connect to external databases, whether that's like S3 buckets on Amazon or a data lake running on Snowflake. You can also run things like connecting to Tableau, and Rstudio Connect can actually host Tableau compatible APIs, so you can actually embed R code and Python code that interacts with Tableau. And then it can always do these more traditional things of working with different decision makers so they can work with Shiny or Dash or our Markdown reports to influence their decisions in a positive way. In terms of closing and wrapping up here, in terms of who we are at Rstudio and what makes us a little bit different, again, a lot of the things we're building are actually free and open source software, and we absolutely want as many people as possible to use that. That's what the Tidyverse is. That's what our Markdown and Shiny and Tidy Models and all the different software that we're creating that we give away for free. These professional software kind of build upon some of that, and it allows us to give away a lot of the software that we create. So if you do need things like authentication, or you're trying to use Shiny in an organization and your IT team says it's a non-starter unless we have authentication or scalability, that's where something like RStudio Connect can come in and solve that problem specifically for you. Specifically in terms of how our funding works, more than 50% of our engineering resources go to free and open source software. So basically half and more than half of our engineering efforts go to giving away software that's free. Our per products fund this ongoing efforts so that we can kind of achieve this mission of giving away and creating free and open source software. And additionally, we contribute to organizations like NumFocus to extend our impact in organizations like Python, where we're not necessarily developing as much today, maybe we do some more in the future, but where we want to contribute financially as well. And then lastly, something I'm really proud of is we're a public benefit corporation, meaning that all of our decisions have to be balanced with the best interest of the community, our customers, the internal employees, and shareholders. We're not just here to improve stock prices for some company. We're here to actually serve the community and do the best job that we can at that. In terms of wrapping up, as we're getting close to the top of the hour, if you did want to learn more, you can read all about serious data science on our blog. Again, these slides, or I saw a slightly different version that I'd published, is available at this link at the bottom that I'll post in the chat again. And that has links to everything I talked about within the slide deck. Trust radius reviews, you can book a live meeting or just send an email to us. If you don't want to talk live, that's fine. And if you wanted to evaluate Rstudio Team and do something similar to what I showed you today, you can fill out this form. We'll send you an evaluation as soon as possible. And then you can do all these cool things in terms of using the team evaluation to see what Workbench, Connect, and Package Manager look like before you have to commit to anything. So that's really it for today. I'll try and answer a few more questions as they come in, but we are at the top of the hour, and I know some people may have only scheduled out the existing time, but I'll stick around for a few more minutes so that we can answer some more questions. Looks like Kelly, thank you so much for answering a lot of the questions as they came up. That was a huge help. So thank you. Just wanted to give, again, Kelly O'Brien, the product manager for Rstudio Connect. Many thanks for her time today in terms of seeing what kind of questions y'all have as community members and for helping answer a lot of those. There was a good question about database information for the, do the database connections need to be created on Rstudio Workbench and Connect? So yes, because they're environments in terms of you could create an interactive environment on Rstudio Workbench. So if I were to go into Rstudio and go into my report portfolio, I can form a connection here and it'll let me, form a connection with all these different databases. But that's interactive in terms of like, I'm basically killing off that connection whenever I close my session. Rstudio Connect is essentially like a service account where you're actually interacting with production code. And so you're going to have to potentially even use a different login credential. So you might use a service account as opposed to like my account being Thomas Mock's account. I would actually use the Rstudio Connect service account to do that. Not required to use a service account, but just saying that they're going to be slightly different. And you would form a similar ODBC connection, but in a slightly different way. Can you close your browser and let your long-running analysis continue? Yes, you could set, I think there was a meme on Twitter I saw about someone driving around in their car with a laptop and the screen open. If this session was going to take a long time, yes, you could run it as a background job and have the timeout be long, so it'll stay open. And these sessions have controllable timeouts. So you can have some sessions that are forced to die off very quickly or last a bit longer. The other option, and what a lot of customers actually do, is for scripts that run that long, it may make more sense to run them via Rstudio Connect. So again, while I can kick off relatively lightweight jobs here, like I'm starting a local job, I'll rerun this because it takes like 2 minutes. If it takes 4 or 5 hours, I could actually build out a workflow around it and have it be done by Rstudio Connect. So now Connect will handle running the entire execution, and then it will generate some type of output. Maybe it generates in our Markdown report talking about the model fit, or it saves the model out as a pin, or it generates an email with information about it once it's done. So a lot of different complexity you can build in there beyond just the lightweight scheduling you can do in Workbench. For the link to the slides, again, I'll copy this over. This is the link directly to the slides, and I heard that there was a slight difference there in terms of the one I showed today. And then for a lot of the different demo assets, those are available here, and a lot of very cool things on solutions.rstudio. So one more link for everybody. What was the difference between Team Standard and Team Enterprise? So that's a good question in terms of if I were to go to Rstudio Team Standard, and we're live opening something up together. So the main difference in between Standard and Enterprise is how many servers you need. For smaller teams, they can you use one server. Like I have Workbench and Connect and Package Manager. I only need one server for those products. For larger customers, we often see that they want to have multiple servers. And that's where Enterprise is a better fit, because you have as many servers as you want. So you could have like a pre-production, a dev, an alpha environment, or staging, as well as your production environment. Or you could do load balancing across multiple servers, or have high availability. So if one server goes down, you have one to flip over to. So really Standard is where a lot of teams start in terms of if they just need one server for everything, that's more than fine. You can also add on individual server components. Enterprise is really just like, I want to get as many servers as I want. I don't want to think about server installs. I can go that route as well. So we're a few minutes over, and looks like the questions have slowed down a little bit. So thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure to have this time with you, and thanks for hanging around with me for an hour. Again, this video will be up on YouTube immediately after I end the call. So you'll be able to access it or rewatch components if I went a little bit quickly. If you have any questions, please reach out to Rstudio. There's a bunch of different links that I put up in the slide deck where you can access some of the information I showed today. You can create an evaluation, email us, book a live call, whatever you want to do. We're here to help out and answer some questions. There was one more question that came in. I definitely want to answer that. So our products do come with professional support that's built into the price. So if you do buy one of the products, that comes with support for maintenance of the Rstudio's Workbench, Rstudio Connect, or Package Manager, or Team, whatever you're purchasing. You also get access to what we call customer success managers. That's where I used to be working before taking on this role. And that's more of like a colleague or a peer who knows a little bit about data science and can help you with like R or Python related questions and help get you in that direction. So again, thank you so much for your time. Have a great and safe weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.